Chippy Nonstop is a DJ, rapper, songwriter, producer, and activist. She's traveled the world, but currently resides in Canada after being deported from the United States in 2015.
I was born in Sharjah, which is the UAE, which people call Dubai. But my parents have Indian passports.
They're Indian by descent and Indian citizens.
Yeah.
They were Indians who immigrated to Dubai.
My dad worked for Lipton, at Unilever. So he was working in Dubai for that. Then he got transferred to Africa, Zambia. And so we, as a family, we all moved to Zambia. My mom and dad didn't want to live in Africa anymore. We went back to Dubai for a bit and tried to see if my parents wanted to live there again, and they weren't feeling it. And then my dad was trying to immigrate to Canada, but then got a job offer in America.
And what type of visa did he come here on?
It was a work visa. I'm not sure what type of work visa.
Mm-hmm.
And then me and my mom were dependent on my dad.
Right. Well, it would have been either an L visa, which is an intra-company transferee visa, an E visa, which would be some sort of investor treaty trader visa, or an H-1B, which would be professional worker.
That sounds the most familiar.
H-1B. Right. Yeah. And then you were in H-4. How old were you at the time?
I was around 10 or 11 maybe.
And where did you immigrate to?
We were living in a suburb of San Diego. I started going to charter school and I homeschooled and finished school quickly. And then I moved out of my parents' house when I was 16.
Did you think about when you were moving out, when you were 16, what your immigration status was? Because you were dependent on your dad's work visa.
Exactly. So I didn't think about that kind of stuff. Because I moved when I was 10, right? And you don't know anything about immigration. And especially I was kind of a rebellious teen, I guess.
So at some point your visa ran out.
I went to school. So then I got a student visa. I transferred onto a student visa.
So you were aware of something.
I just didn't know how complicated processes were.
Who took care of the student visa for you? Your parents, I assume.
Yeah, my parents. Yeah.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to school in San Francisco at art school, 2009, 2010. In my first year, I started kind of working, but you're not allowed to work under student visa if you're an immigrant. But I was kind of working because people were giving me jobs just to work at their magazine or write for their newspaper and stuff like that about music.
Did you graduate college?
No.
All right. So at some point you stopped school.
I told my parents I was dropping out of school, and they said, well, you're going to have to switch back to the dependent visa. And then they obviously didn't want me to drop out of school. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll switch to the dependent visa.
That only lasts till you're 21.
Exactly. And I didn't understand the severity of switching back and forth from student visa to this visa. And then when that expires, what do you do? All this time I'm working.
Right. Which is you're working without permission. All this time you're violating your visa and don't even realize.
Yeah. And now in retrospect, obviously I know that.
You came here as a child dependent on your parents' work visa. You switched to a student visa. You wanted to give up school. You switched back to a dependent on your dad's work visa. And when you turn 21, you fall off that visa. You went on tour and you left the U.S.
Yeah. But this was before I got deported. I guess I was kind of flying under the radar. And when I played in Japan and when I came back, that's when I got in trouble.
You had an Indian passport.
Yeah, I had an Indian passport. They knew that I was a student here. My family lives here. I would hand them my passport as ID. I showed security. And then I got into a room and I was just in a room with 3 people sitting looking really sad. And I was just oh shit.
Are you scared?
Yeah, I'm terrified. And then after that, they take me into a room and they are asking me all these questions, taking my fingerprints and everything. And then they asked me where I wanted to go, if I wanted to fly to India or back to Japan or to Mexico or Canada.
Well, why Mexico?
You just had to go somewhere to leave the country, because then my parents could have just met me in Mexico because they live in San Diego.
I see. Then how did you end up in Canada?
And then so I decided to go to Vancouver.
Why Vancouver?
Just because it was the closest Canadian English-speaking place.
You can come back on an O1 visa, somebody with extraordinary ability. I don't know if you were asked to just withdraw your admission to the United States or you had a summary inadmissibility order. There's 2 different things that could have happened at the airport. But it sounds like they just asked you to withdraw your admission and go to another country and pay your own way. You never had a summary in admissibility, so you can come back on an O1 visa.
But then they banned me for 10 years.
You have a 10-year bar because you were out of status for more than a year. But you still can come back on a waiver.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the type of opportunity that you can get in America is insane.
But you can do an O1 visa,
Yeah.
extraordinary ability, and get a waiver and come to the United States and work.